Hi, my name is Bob and I'm renovating this 1973 Egg Harbor Sportfish boat. Well, hello everyone, welcome to Renovation Sportfish. It's episode 12 and we're still covering the projects I worked on in the year 2014. This is the third part, and I guess in the series of covering these projects. Now 2014 mostly involved working on the Flybridge. But I did work on other projects. There's always other projects going on, and I thought I'd show a couple of photos of one of the projects I had started. And that involved the interior ceiling. Now, the original ceiling had a vinyl headliner attached to it, and I really didn't want anything to do with that, because I was going to have everything exposed up there. The one part I had to do now before I fiberglassed was there was a center piece of wood from the factory, and you can see it here in this picture. And it was right where the two pieces of plywood on the Flybridge deck met together, and they screwed into this piece of wood. That little piece of wood, I wanted to replace it with something a little heftier, and I kind of wanted to use the same profile I used for the windshield center post that I had installed earlier in a previous video. I wanted that piece of wood to look like it came right out, went right in front, between the windshield, and came right up and ran right down the center of the boat, kind of like a spine, with the ceiling beams being like of the ribs, I guess you'd call it. So I had to cut out this little piece in between the ceiling beams and replace it with this heftier piece of mahogany. Now I've attached these pieces through the Flybridge decking, just like the original little piece was, and epoxied it all in to the ceiling beams, and then I ran one screw through one ceiling beam that I could as I worked my way back. So that's what you're going to see in these photos, so let's take a look at that before we get into the other stuff. So now back to the Flybridge. The next thing to do on the Flybridge in the reconstruction was to fabricate and install a lower support for the front walls, kind of similar to what I did on the side walls. Now the factory just had a couple pieces of wood here and there at the lower part, and then they caulked in between, but I wanted a full solid piece. So I came up with a profile that I thought would work well. I cut it out on my table saw and brought the piece over there to install it. Well, I was kind of surprised, but I shouldn't have been. When I went to fit it in, I realized that, oh man, this piece has to be curved. It wasn't a straight piece. Just with the angles of the walls coming down to the camber of the deck and all this stuff. So I was like left there kind of scratching my head, like, how am I going to curve this now? And I wasn't going to steam bend it, that wasn't even an option. So I decided to just cut like 3 relief cuts in it on my table saw, and hoping that would work. So I did that, brought it back to the boat, and sure enough it worked. Let it bend just enough to get the curve I needed. The only other challenge with it was trying to hit something solid underneath when I was screwing down in through the deck. I just didn't want to screw into the plywood. I wanted to hit a beam or a piece of blocking or something. So luckily it worked and I didn't mess up. And so once that was in, I put a fillet along the bottom of it, and then I was able to remove the sidewalls and the helm station that I had temporarily set up there. I also removed the ugly tube with all the wires and cables and everything coming out of it that you'll see in some of these pictures, and I'll say good riddance to that, because that's not going back in. I've got other ideas for that thing. And then once that was out of there, the whole deck, everything was clear, and I was able to finish the fiberglassing of the deck and fiberglass over that support piece. So that's what you're going to see coming up right now. So with all the lower supports in, everything fiberglassed and everything cleared off, the next thing to do was install the sidewalls in the Helm station. So I'll let the pictures speak for themselves and show you the photos. Well, it felt good to get those sidewalls and Helm station in, but as you could see in those photos, the Helm station was just kind of hovering in space. It still needed some support structure below it. So that's what I'm going to talk about and show next. Now, I created and fabricated a couple of vertical supports. One ran along the sidewall, and one was right at the edge of the Helm station. That was on both sides. There's also another support you'll see here, runs along the deck. Now that one did a couple things. The way they were angled in towards the front, their intention was to deflect water that's going to get under the Helm station, because the Helm station has about a 6-inch gap under it when it's all said and done. Water's going to get in there, and when it gets in, it's going to want to go off to the sides, but this will keep it from going inside the cabinets, and it'll hopefully deflect it and bring it out in front of the cabinets and through that. So that's the intent anyways. It'll also be somewhere for me to attach cabinets and things later on too. But in this case right now, it was a place for me to screw the bottom of the Helm station side supports too, to attach that to the deck. So let's take a look at those 3 supports, and they're all made out of solid mahogany, and then I'll break in and we'll talk about the cabinet faces. That was finished, I could start fabricating and installing the cabinet face frames. I made these out of 3/4 inch Doug Fir marine grade plywood. They're a little bit wider than the original cabinets, only because I moved the sidewalls out about 1.5 inches on each side. The opening you see cut in them is the same size as the original because I'm planning on reusing the original doors that were on the cabinets. And so once I got these things fitted, which took quite a while because of the curve on the bottom and they were kind of a little bit of an angle and things, I brought them home and fiberglassed the inside and outside before I installed them. Sanded it all down and got it all ready to go. So when I brought them back to the boat to install them, I just clamped them in place and I screwed them in from the back side through the mahogany supports I had just installed at the sides and at the top. There was one on the inside of the dashboard. That way I didn't mess up any of the face with screw holes in my new fiberglass. So once I get that fitted in there, I epoxied it, thickened epoxy in the screws and got that installed. At the bottom, I just epoxied the bottom. And in the photos, I didn't get to it yet, but once everything was installed, I've put fillets around all of the sides on the inside and outside. The next thing was to fabricate and fit the front walls. Now these are made out of 1/2 inch marine grade Doug fir plywood, same as the side walls. And I was really amazed when I first cut these things and dropped them on to the side walls in the front there. And you'll see in the second photograph how tight the fit is between the front wall and that side wall. And I was really happy with that. But as soon as I got over my giddiness, I had to get right to work on fabricating a couple of supports, one on each side wall and one at the center. So that's what you're going to see. These supports, they actually were installed, but the front walls I didn't install in this video. I'm not anyways. I wanted to leave them so I could take them off so that I could paint the inside of the cabinets before I put them on. It just was so much room, it would be silly to install them and then crawl around under there trying to paint. Plus I never used the paint before and I wanted to experiment a little bit. So anyways, everything's just going to be fitting here. So here you go, front walls. to do it for this episode. The next episode, we're going to wrap up 2014, so that'll be pretty cool. So until then, have a good one, and we'll see you soon right here on Renovation Sportfish.